You cannot step into the future while dragging the corpse of your past behind you. Hear me carefully tonight, because this is not just motivation. This is a confrontation. There comes a moment in every person's life when who you have been becomes an enemy to who you are called to become. And if you do not recognize that moment, you will spend your entire life negotiating with a version of yourself that was only meant to be temporary. You cannot be the old you anymore. Not because the old you was worthless, but because the old you has expired. There are seasons in life, and every season has an assignment. But when the assignment is over, the identity that carried you through that season must also be released. The tragedy of many lives is not failure, it is staying successful in a season that has already ended. Some of you are still trying to function with a mindset that was designed for survival when your current season requires leadership. Some of you are still thinking like someone who is trying to be accepted when your purpose demands that you stand alone. Some of you are still holding on to habits that once protected you, but are now suffocating you. You cannot be the old you anymore. And I know what you're thinking, but this is who I am. Oh, no, that is who you became. That is who you adapted into. That is who you learned to be in response to pain, rejection, fear, or limitation. But adaptation is not identity. Let me say that again. Adaptation is not identity. You were not created to merely respond to life. You were created to define it. But as long as you cling to the old version of yourself, you will never discover the original you that has been buried under layers of compromise. Some of you have mastered the art of survival, but you have never learned the discipline of transformation. And survival will keep you alive, but it will never make you fulfilled. There is a difference between being alive and being aligned. And many people are breathing, but they are not living in alignment with who they were designed to be. You cannot be the old you anymore. Why? Because the future you require demands a different structure. Every level of your life requires a new version of you. The mindset that got you here cannot take you there. The habits that sustained you in one dimension will sabotage you in another. You cannot carry insecurity into a space that demands authority. You cannot carry fear into a space that demands courage. You cannot carry indecision into a space that demands clarity. And yet, many people are trying to upgrade their lives without upgrading themselves. You want new opportunities, but you are still operating with old thinking. You want greater responsibility, but you are still avoiding discipline. You want influence, but you are still governed by the opinions of others. It does not work that way. Life does not respond to what you wish. It responds to who you are. And if who you are does not change, what you experience will not change. You cannot be the old you anymore. Now listen, this is where it becomes uncomfortable. Because letting go of the old you is not easy. The old you is familiar. The old you is predictable. The old you knows how to navigate the environments you've already mastered. But the new you requires risk. The new you requires uncertainty. The new you requires you to step into spaces where you are no longer the expert, where you are no longer in control, where you are forced to grow. And most people would rather remain comfortable than become powerful. But comfort is the greatest enemy of transformation, because comfort convinces you that where you are is enough. Comfort whispers, stay here. You've made it this far. But purpose shouts, there is more. And you must decide which voice you will obey. You cannot be the old you anymore. Some of you are holding on to relationships that were only meant for a previous version of you. And because you refuse to grow, those relationships feel comfortable. But the moment you begin to evolve, those same relationships will begin to resist you. Why? Because growth disrupts familiarity. When you change, you expose the limitations of those who refuse to. And not everyone will celebrate your transformation. Some people benefited from your insecurity. Some people were comfortable with your silence. Some people preferred the version of you that needed them. But the new you does not need validation. The new you does not seek permission. The new you understands that purpose is greater than approval. And if you are waiting for everyone to understand your evolution, you will never evolve. You cannot be the old you anymore. There are habits you must kill. There are mindsets you must dismantle. There are excuses you must bury, because you cannot build a new life on top of an old foundation. And some of you are trying to add discipline without removing distraction. You are trying to add focus without removing confusion. You are trying to add growth without removing comfort. But transformation is not addition. It is replacement. Something must die for something greater to live. And the question is not whether change is necessary. The question is, are you willing to pay the price for it? Because growth has a cost. It will cost you your excuses. It will cost you your comfort. It will cost you your old identity. It will cost you the approval of people who no longer recognize you. But what it gives you in return is far greater. It gives you clarity. It gives you power. It gives you alignment with your true purpose. And once you taste that, you will never want to go back. You cannot be the old you anymore. Let me challenge you. Stop introducing yourself based on your past. Stop defining yourself by your mistakes. Stop identifying with your limitations. You are not your history. You are not your failures. You are not even your current condition. You are a possibility, and possibility demands movement. You cannot claim a future you refuse to prepare for. You cannot become what you are unwilling to practice. Transformation is not a moment, it is a process. And that process requires consistency, not emotion, not motivation, but discipline. Because there will be days when you do not feel like becoming the new you. There will be days when the old habits call your name. There will be days when the familiar feels easier than the necessary. But greatness is not built on what you feel. It is built on what you do despite how you feel. You cannot be the old you anymore. And understand this, the longer you delay your transformation, the more painful it becomes. Because life will eventually force you to change. Opportunities will pass you. People will outgrow you. Doors will close. Not because you are not capable, but because you refuse to evolve. And evolution is not optional. It is required. Everything in life grows or dies. Nothing stays the same. So if you are not intentionally growing, you are unintentionally declining. There is no neutral ground. You cannot be the old you anymore. Tonight, this is your moment. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. Because clarity without action is useless. You can understand everything I am saying, but if you walk out of here and remain the same, nothing changes. Transformation begins with a decision that says, I refuse to remain who I used to be. I refuse to think the way I used to think. I refuse to live beneath my potential. And once that decision is made, everything else must align with it. Your habits must align. Your environment must align. Your focus must align. Because a decision without alignment is deception. You cannot say you want to change and still entertain what keeps you the same. You cannot be the old you anymore. So I ask you, who must you become? Not who have you been, not who are you right now, but who must you become to fulfill the assignment on your life? Because that version of you already exists in potential. But potential is useless without activation. And activation requires courage. The courage to let go. The courage to step forward. The courage to embrace the unknown. And the courage to walk away from anything that contradicts your future. Some of you already know what you need to release. You've been feeling it. You've been ignoring it. You've been negotiating with it. But deep down, and until you confront it, you will remain stuck between who you were and who you are meant to be. That space is the most dangerous place to live because it creates frustration. You can see the future, but you cannot reach it. You can feel the potential, but you cannot access it. And the only thing separating you is your unwillingness to let go of the old you. You cannot be the old you anymore. So stand up in your mind tonight. Make a declaration within yourself. Draw a line and say, this is where it ends. This is where I change. This is where I become. Because your life is waiting for you. But it is waiting for the version of you that is ready. Not the version that is comfortable. Not the version that is afraid. Not the version that is stuck. But the version that is disciplined, focused, intentional, aligned, and courageous enough to evolve. You cannot be the old you anymore. And once you accept that, everything changes. Reinvention requires consistency long after the excitement of change fades, because the truth is most people are not defeated at the beginning. They are defeated in the middle. They start strong. They feel the surge of inspiration. They make bold declarations. They change their routines for a week, maybe 2. They feel different. They feel powerful. They feel like something has shifted. But then something happens. The feeling fades. The excitement disappears. And what remains is the work. This is where most people disappear. Because excitement is emotional, but consistency is intentional. Excitement will carry you for a moment, but only discipline will carry you for a lifetime. And if your transformation is built on how you feel, then your transformation will collapse the moment your feelings change. You cannot build a new life on temporary emotions. You must build it on permanent decisions, and decisions are proven through repetition. Not once, not twice, but again and again and again, until the new becomes natural, because anything that is not repeated will not be retained. And many people are living in cycles, not because they lack desire, but because they lack consistency. They touch progress, but they never hold it. They experience change, but they never sustain it. They visit a new version of themselves, but they never move in. Because moving in requires commitment beyond excitement. And this is where the real work begins. Because once the applause in your mind quiets down, once the motivation settles, once the novelty wears off, you are left with a choice. Will you continue or will you return? And understand this, returning is always easier. Returning requires no effort. Returning requires no discipline. Returning only requires you to stop trying. And the moment you stop trying, the old you is waiting, patient, familiar, comfortable, ready to welcome you back into patterns you once said you outgrew. This is why consistency is not just a habit. It is a defense system. It protects your future from your past. It keeps you moving when your emotions try to pull you backward. It stabilizes you when your mind begins to negotiate with comfort. Because your mind will try to negotiate. It will tell you, you've done enough. It will say, take a break. It will suggest you can skip today. But transformation does not respond to suggestions. It responds to standards. And standards are revealed in what you do when you do not feel like doing anything at all. Anyone can be consistent when it is easy. Anyone can show up when they feel inspired. Anyone can commit when everything is going well. But the real test of reinvention is what you do when it is inconvenient, when it is uncomfortable, when it is repetitive, when it feels like nothing is changing. Because that is the moment where identity is being formed. Not in the excitement, but in the endurance. You see, excitement introduces you to possibility. But consistency introduces you to identity. And identity is not built in moments, it is built in patterns. What you do consistently becomes who you are eventually. Not what you intend, not what you desire, not what you plan, but what you repeat. And this is where many people misunderstand transformation. They think change happens when they decide. No. Change begins when you decide, but it is established when you repeat. Because a decision without repetition is just an idea. And ideas do not change lives, patterns do. So if you want to become someone new, you must be willing to do new things long enough for them to become normal. And long enough is where most people fail. Because they underestimate the time it takes to rewire who they are. You are not just changing actions, you are changing identity. And identity resists change. It fights back. It pulls you toward familiarity. Because your mind is designed to preserve what is known, even if what is known is limiting. So when you begin to reinvent yourself, you are going against your own conditioning. And that requires more than excitement. That requires persistence. Because there will be days when the new you feels unnatural. Days when the old habits feel stronger. Days when progress feels invisible. And if you are not anchored in consistency, you will interpret that discomfort as failure. But it is not failure. It is transition. It is the space between who you were and who you are becoming. And that space is uncomfortable by design. Because growth stretches you. It challenges you. It forces you to operate beyond what feels normal. But if you stop every time it feels uncomfortable, you will never grow beyond your current capacity. You will only reinforce your limitations. Consistency is what allows you to push through that resistance, to keep going when your mind is uncertain, to keep showing up when results are not immediate, to keep building when there is no visible reward. Because the most powerful transformations happen in silence. They happen in the unseen. They happen in the daily decisions that no one applauds. And this is why many people miss it. Because they are looking for dramatic change. They are looking for instant results. They are looking for visible proof. But real reinvention is subtle. It is quiet. It is gradual. It is the accumulation of small, consistent actions over time. And those actions may not feel significant in the moment. But over time, they compound. They reshape your thinking. They redefine your behavior. They reconstruct your identity. Until one day, you realize you are no longer the person you used to be. Not because of one big moment, but because of many small, consistent decisions. And this is the discipline most people avoid, because it is not glamorous, it is not exciting, it is not dramatic, it is repetitive, it is ordinary. It is showing up when nothing feels special and doing it anyway. Because consistency does not require excitement. It requires commitment. A commitment to a standard, a commitment to a vision, a commitment to becoming someone greater than your current self. And that commitment must be stronger than your emotions, stronger than your distractions, stronger than your excuses, because excuses will come. They will sound reasonable. They will feel justified. They will present themselves as logic. But they are simply resistance in disguise. And if you entertain them, they will break your consistency. And once consistency is broken, momentum is lost. And once momentum is lost, returning becomes harder, so you must protect your consistency at all costs. Not perfectly, but persistently. Because consistency is not about never failing. It is about never stopping. It is about continuing even after you fall, continuing even after you miss a day, continuing even after you feel discouraged. Because one mistake does not define you, but quitting does. And many people quit quietly. They do not announce it. They do not make a decision to stop. They just slowly drift back into old patterns. They skip one day, then another, until the new habits disappear and the old identity returns. Not because they chose it, but because they stopped choosing differently. You must understand, reinvention is not a one-time act. It is a daily responsibility. Every day, You are either reinforcing the new you or resurrecting the old you. Every action is a vote. Every decision is a signal. Every habit is a brick. And over time, those bricks build a structure. The question is, what are you building? Because whether you realize it or not, you are always building something. Even when you are doing nothing, you are building habits of inaction. Even when you are avoiding growth, you are reinforcing stagnation. So you cannot escape consistency. You are always being consistent with something. The issue is not whether you are consistent. The issue is what you are consistent with. Are you consistent with growth? Or are you consistent with excuses? Are you consistent with discipline? Or are you consistent with comfort? Because whatever you consistently choose will define you, and definition determines direction. So if you want to go somewhere new, you must consistently choose something new. Even when it feels repetitive, even when it feels boring, even when it feels like it is not working, because results are delayed. They do not show up immediately. They show up after you have proven that you are committed, after you have demonstrated persistence, after you have built the capacity to handle what you are asking for. And this is why consistency is not just about doing, it is about becoming. It is about developing the character required to sustain your next level. Because it is one thing to reach a new level. It is another thing to remain there, and many people can reach, but they cannot remain. They can start, but they cannot sustain, because they relied on excitement to get there. But excitement cannot keep you there. Only discipline can. Only consistency can. Because the higher you go, the more stability is required. The more responsibility is required. The more discipline is required. And if you do not build that discipline now, you will not be able to maintain what you are asking for later. So consistency is not punishment. It is preparation. It is training. It is development. It is the process of becoming someone who can handle more, do more, and be more. And that process cannot be rushed. It cannot be skipped. It cannot be replaced with shortcuts. Because shortcuts do not build identity. They only produce temporary results. And temporary results will collapse without a consistent foundation. So, if you are serious about reinvention, you must fall in love with the process, not the outcome, not the excitement, but the process, the daily work, the repetition, the discipline, because that is where transformation lies, not in what is visible, but in what is repeated. And repetition requires patience. It requires trust. It requires the ability to keep going without immediate validation. Because validation will not always be there. Encouragement will not always be there. Results will not always be there. But your commitment must remain. Because if your commitment depends on external reinforcement, it is weak. It must be internal. It must be rooted in your decision, in your vision, in your refusal to go back to who you used to be. And that refusal must be strong enough to carry you through the days when nothing feels different. Because those are the days that matter most. Those are the days where consistency is tested, where identity is formed, where transformation is solidified. And if you can remain consistent in those moments, when it is quiet, when it is repetitive, when it is difficult, then nothing can stop your growth. Because you are no longer driven by emotion. You are driven by discipline. And discipline is reliable. It does not fluctuate. It does not depend on mood. It does not require motivation. It simply executes again and again and again, until what was once difficult becomes automatic, until what was once unnatural becomes normal, until what was once a decision becomes a lifestyle. And that is when you know you are no longer trying to reinvent yourself. You have become someone new, not because of what you felt, but because of what you consistently did. And what you consistently did rewrote who you are. Reinvention requires consistency long after the excitement of change fades.